All right, welcome. So I'm delighted to be able to talk to you about roadmaps today. It's a subject that's close to my heart, something I've been thinking about for a number of years, and I suppose it's because everybody likes the idea and everybody hates the practice. And what I mean by that is, whenever you get into a planning session, it won't be long before somebody says, well, we should have a strategic roadmap. And of course, you should have a strategic roadmap. Nobody in the room is going to disagree with that. But in the back of everyone's minds is the knowledge that a strategic roadmap is an awful thing and a waste of time. And we've all been there. There are roadmaps which are just full of low-hanging fruit that don't actually add up to anything. They're just places to put the quick wins, and nobody has the confidence to set a longer goal. The word for management is, look, focus on the quick wins, focus on the quick wins. We'll do the big stuff tomorrow. We'll get round to that sometime. Today, it's about quick wins. And so is the roadmap really strategic? It's just a collection of business as usual fixes, small things, and the big stuff, the stuff that everyone knows needs to get done, the stuff that needs planning and thought and coordination, never really makes it on there because, as I say, nobody has the confidence. Of course, there's the other sort of roadmap, the roadmap for the very big project, the roadmap that just stretches into the distance, and you never seem to make progress on it. I have friends who have been working at a company on the very big project, left the company, returned to the company 2 years later, and discovered that the very big project is still running and nobody knows when it will end. Sometimes roadmaps are so strategic that you never actually get to see any progress on them, and perhaps never make any progress on them. The other kind of roadmap, of course, is the roadmap that nobody really believes. The roadmap that is a strategic vision of the future, but is there a plan to make it happen? Does anybody really think we're going to get there? And you come across organizations where that vision's in place, but then you look around and you're like, but the work that's being done today doesn't actually seem to be related to that. And sure enough, when the vision deadline comes around, well, a new vision takes its place, and is conveniently put on the shelf, and ignored, just like the last one. And then there's the very old roadmap. A lot of roadmaps get written, and then just ignored. And like any road where nobody does any maintenance, where nobody ever visits it, it just crumbles into nothing. So, yeah, we should have a strategic roadmap, but I find the reality of roadmaps very often is that they don't really do the things that an organization wants. And it reminds me in some ways of the old joke, the guy who's out walking through the country, and he's lost, and sees a car go by, waves it down, says, "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to Newton?" And the guy in the car looks at him, looks up the road, looks behind him, and says, "Well, you don't want to start from here." I think very often when it comes to a genuine strategic vision, an ambitious vision of what our product or service could look like in the future, we all feel that we're starting from the wrong place. And it's very difficult to think, well, how does anybody do this? How does anybody get from a really unpromising situation into delivering something that's big and bold and ambitious? And perhaps that's the reason that many of those problems crop up on the roadmaps that we see in real life. So you know what? Let's think of an example of a company that has set out from what looks like a very unpromising position and moved itself into a position of dominance. And you know what? I should never use Apple examples in presentations, except here is one, because back in the late 2000s, Apple was a software and hardware company. It wasn't a services company. It certainly wasn't a financial services company. And yet today, Apple is a tremendous powerhouse in financial services. It's got probably the most commonly used digital payments platform that's out there in Apple Pay. But the roadmap to Apple Pay is really interesting because, just like the guy in the joke, they didn't want to start from there. I think the roadmap to Apple Pay begins with a little piece of software called Keychain. Keychain was a utility, actually a background utility, buried in a subfolder of the applications folder of OS X. And when Apple created the iPhone, it built the iPhone on the same software that it had built the Mac on, and so Keychain came across and was part of the background sort of suite of software that was there on people's iPhones. It's just there to manage passwords. Once you type a password in once, it will remember that password for you, so you don't need to retype your email password every time you open up mail. The software knows it. It knows that you've logged in, and it will use that password. Not long after the iPhone came out, Apple created iCloud and provided this sort of syncing feature so that passwords and information that you'd included on your Mac or another computer or a web service could be shared with your smartphone. That meant that all those long, complicated things that you had to type in, you only typed in once on one device, and then that was it. It would remember and synchronize them. A couple of years after that, it expanded that to include other information, not just passwords, but your name, your address, your credit card details, if you type those into your phone. And pretty soon after that, it implemented Touch ID, so that you didn't have to type in a passcode to unlock your phone. You could do it with a touch of your thumb. And the year after it included Touch ID, it released Apple Pay. Apple Pay would, with a touch of your thumb, authenticate you on the device. It would use your credit card details to make a payment on a contactless terminal, and it very rapidly became the most commonly used payments system in digital payments, far outstripping the systems that the banks have been trying to put in place for years. So look at that, and you can see a really interesting story unfold. You can see how a piece of software that was designed to protect passwords and privacy evolved into part of the foundation of a payments platform. You can see that year on year, Apple was releasing value to customers, and that value built up into something that became Apple Pay. It wasn't a big bang project. It was a series of small steps that all led in this direction. Now, the story of Apple Pay is even more complex than that. There are many other components that Apple was putting in place in the background, and I know from the interviews that they've given that they've been thinking about how do we do this for years. But this is a kind of a simplified version of that story. And when you look at that, I think one of the things that you notice is it really requires an enormous amount of discipline to hold a vision across a number of years and to see those quick wins add up. So the question is, how do you get an organization to hold on to that level of discipline? How do you avoid distraction? How do you avoid disagreement? How do you avoid a lack of confidence? And really, that's what a great roadmap should do. It should enable you to build those quick wins into big wins. It should enable you to hold on to a vision. It should enable you to adapt as the situation around you changes. So what does it look like then for you and me? What does it look like for somebody who is trying to manage or lead a service or work as part of a service in order to to set a strategic direction and stick to it? Well, a few years ago, a product manager came to me and he said, "Look, I've got a problem. We've been doing some user research about what we should do next for our product in the pension space, and we've identified a whole list of things, about 36 different things that actually need to get done. And the business has come back to me and said, can you write a business case for each of these? And then we can select the things that need to happen. And you think, writing one business case is hard enough. Writing 36 business cases so that you can perhaps throw away 33 of them and focus on 3 things seems insane. And it led to this kind of paralysis, right? How do you move forward when there are so many things and nobody can agree on what they are? And meanwhile, there was a stakeholder in the background who was saying, you know what we should do? We should build a dashboard. And there's always somebody who wants to build a dashboard, right? And in my experience, dashboards seem like they're delivering a lot of value to users. Everybody wants a dashboard, like everybody wants a roadmap. We'll deliver a dashboard to our users, and then they can figure out what they want to do. It's putting in control in their hands. Except, of course, it never is. It's never helping users. So within those 36 things that they needed to do, there had surely to be a better idea than that. So we said, well, let's hold off on the business case. Let's just go back and look at what we've got here and try and organize these. And I think when businesses, large businesses in particular, try to sift through ideas, one of the things that comes up a lot is this idea of the balanced scorecard. Right? Let's try and prioritize these things, perhaps by balancing whether something is valuable for business or customer or feasibility, or let's look at its regulatory score. And the problem for me is it doesn't really give you clarity about how you're going to organize stuff, about how different things might be related. And for me, the challenge with the balanced scorecard is that it doesn't have a strong vision behind it. And if you're going to lead people into a distant and uncertain future, I think you need clarity of vision. And to do that, you need clarity of what is it that drives the business forward, what I call a theory of business. Now, I'm a user-centered design person. And for me, that means that there's a very clear theory of business. And the theory of business, I think, works in most situations. And that is this: by delivering customer value, we create business value. In other words, if we do things that customers want, they will be prepared to buy them from us. They might be prepared to pay more than they pay for a competitor, and therefore we create value for the business. We deliver things that are feasible. Obviously, something needs to be organizationally feasible. It needs to be technically feasible. So we choose the things that are feasible, and we make sure that we respect the regulations or the mission of the organization that we work for. And for me, that's a way better way of thinking about the different lenses for organizing stuff than the balanced scorecard, because it's clear that there's a hierarchy here. First of all, you do what the customer needs. Then you do that, make sure you're doing that in ways that turn you a profit, or if you're a public sector organization, that do things as efficiently as possible, make best use of taxpayer money. And you do that in ways that are feasible, and you do that in ways that respect the regulations and rules that you need to work within. And I call that a theory of business because it starts to organize how those different elements are put together. What that means is your lens for thinking about all of those different ideas really begins with, well, what is it that customers value? What is it that they're trying to do? And so the product manager and I went back to this list of 36 different possible things that they could do. We said, well, let's not worry about business cases yet. Let's just cluster them. Let's see what happens when we try and organize them by customer themes. And actually, that led to a really simple organization. We realized we had 3 big themes of stuff, and then a bunch of things which are essentially bug fixes that we just pushed over to one side. These are things that it didn't matter what we did, at some point we'd need to fix this bug. Here's a little error. It's not really part of a bigger theme. It's just a business as usual stuff that needs to get done. So from a strategic point of view, we could ignore those. They're things that we need to have a team working on, but they weren't part of some kind of strategic vision. We looked at each of those clusters and we said, well, what's going on here? And one of them was a roadmap. It was a dashboard, in fact. But, so we could have gone, oh, yes, there's the dashboard idea. It contains all of these items of the 36. But that's not enough. The business wanted us to create a business case. In other words, it wanted us to prioritize things. What's the best opportunity to support our customers? Now, again, we could have gone into the detail of putting together a business case. Now we only had 3 to write. But to my mind, that's still a great deal of effort. And I wondered if we really needed to do that. In fact, in most cases, when you start to pull that information together, you realize that you're missing big gaps of stuff. So a business case really is something you need to be pretty sure that you're on the right track before you put in all of that effort. So again, we needed a quick way of sorting through ideas and trying to figure out which ones were most important. And we did that really straightforwardly. We said, okay, well, let's get a bunch of different experts from around the business together and let's evaluate things and just give a red, amber, or green rating to, do we think this is going to be valuable to customers? Is it going to do something for them that's unique, that's important, that other people can't do, they can't get elsewhere? Do we think it's going to be valuable to the business? Is it something that the business is going to see retain customers? Or is it something the business is going to see it's able to charge for customers? And is it feasible? Is it something that will work in terms of regulation, in terms of operations, in terms of technology? And so we got a group of people together and just rated the different ideas. And we found that there was one idea, theme number 3, which was tremendously valuable to customers and actually would have an enormous value to the business. In terms of feasibility, it was going to require an enormous amount of organizational effort or perhaps a change in regulation to make that idea viable. So it got a big red no for feasibility. We disregarded that. Dashboard idea was kind of valuable to customers. They could sort of see that it'd be useful. It's sort of valuable to the business as well. Customers might be a bit better informed when they came to have conversations about their pensions. And it was reasonably easy to do. Didn't seem like a big win, though. Meanwhile, one of the other ideas turned out to be valuable to the customer, super valuable to the business, and actually really relatively feasible to do. And so we had a clear winner. Now, at this point, we knew we had to go back to the stakeholders and have a conversation with them and to talk to them about this is the idea that we want to do. We thought before we wrote our report, we would check in with them. And so we talked them through our thinking. In fact, what I've shown you is pretty much what we showed them. We walked them through this board where we had organized the things that could be done, the green post-its here, into a bunch of BAU stuff, which we put over in the corner, a bunch of themes, and we'd done some RAG rating of them. And so it looked something like that. We had a vision. This is what we want to do for our customers as a business. Here are the themes. Here's the RAG rating. What do you think? And the stakeholders, including the stakeholders who had very different ideas about how we should go about organizing stuff or what the right answer would be, looked at this and they said, this makes perfect sense. We love it. Go ahead and build the thing that you've identified. Didn't even need to get to the final report because the thinking was right there in front of them and they could walk through it, investigate it, and understand what we'd done. That for me is really the essence of what you're trying to do in a roadmap. You're trying to take all of those little things that you could do and start to make sense of them and start to pull them together into themes that are valuable to the customer, valuable to the organization, and that can be done. It helps, of course, to be able to express that in a vision. And the vision could be a video, it could be a small statement. We, in fact, did a little storyboard just to explain what it was we thought would be going on. And that gave people a sense of, okay, this is where we're going, and here are all the small things we need to do to get there. And for me, that's the essence of a good roadmap. The roadmaps don't exist at one moment in time. They don't just exist at the start of the journey. They're tools for planning the future. And the problem with cunning plans is that the unexpected happens. And so I think roadmaps are about doing just enough planning. If you do a Google search for product roadmaps, you see a lot of tools that look like this, a lot of tools that look like Gantt charts and project plans. And that, I think, is the wrong way to think about a roadmap, because as I've said, the thing about plans is they don't live in a fixed moment in time. They encounter reality, and if you're trying to plan across a period of 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to encounter a lot of unexpected stuff along the way. As they say, no plan survives contact with the enemy. No plan survives contact with reality. And there's an awful lot of reality involved in a 3, 4, 5-year plan. I think part of the problem here is that the language we use is road maps. Well, in reality, there isn't a road that we're following. There isn't a sort of set of turn-by-turn directions that we can go along, and we know exactly what options we've got at each stage. we are leading people into a murky and uncertain future. And roadmap might not be the right word because it suggests a degree of certainty that we just don't have. I think roadmaps are much more like planning something like a rock climb. Think about what you do when you scale a cliff face. And I think there are kind of three lenses, three levels of detail that you look at. You stand back from the face and you know where you're going. I'm trying to get to the top. I'm trying to get to round about there. And a little closer to it, you can see what looks like a likely route through. So I'm probably going to head in this sort of direction. I'm going to avoid that part of the rock face, and I'm going to go here where it looks like there are more handholds. But it's not a precise route. And then day to day, minute to minute, you're reaching out and you're finding which part of the rock face actually can bear your weight. Where is there a handhold or a foothold within reach? And you're making those specific moves in the here and now. So 3 levels of detail. And I think that's a good way to think about roadmaps, to think about what's now, what's next, what's future. I'll give you an example of that. Imagine it's 10, 15 years ago, and you're creating a video service. Your customer vision for the video service is that you're going to have loads of content, but whenever the customer opens it up, they should be able to find something that's of interest to them. So your vision is something like, I open it up and bang, it's got 5 things on screen that you might want to watch. Reality is you just started the service though. So what can you do? Well, the first thing that you can do is take your catalog of stuff and just organize it into types of content. Organize it into action films, comedy films, rom-coms, documentaries, and so on. And by creating a little bit of metadata around it, you can help people to sift through what they've got. Next, you might start to put in something like a search with some advanced features so that people can hunt around and look for what they're doing. And the great thing about that is that you can also start to gather data on what it is that people think they want and what they do want and what they're searching for and what they actually end up watching. And with that data, you could start to train an AI to say, okay, it's this person. They're coming back to the TV at this time of day. They're probably watching something with their kids. They probably want to see something like this when they open it up. So roadmaps really need those sort of 3 phases, those 3 lenses. Phase 1, where you do something that's easy and within reach. You set direction. Let's come up with some better categories that better fit the ideas that people have about what they want to watch. Phase 2, you build capability. Let's create a better search. Phase 3, you deliver something that's at scale and ambitious. Let's take all of the data that we've got and apply that to machine learning. And I think that is the way to create a roadmap. It's not a project plan because your vision of isn't really about how you're going to do things. It's about the sorts of things that you're going to do. And it's tied together with a theme, a customer-oriented theme. In this case, customer-oriented theme being, how do we make sure that people can quickly find something that's of interest to them? And that changes as our capability changes, as we add up all of those quick wins into something bigger and better each time. So really, you're not creating a project plan. You're saying, what problems do we need to solve next? And how do we move through phase 1, the stuff that we're doing right now, the stuff that we might be doing next, and the stuff that we're doing once we've built up the skills, the capability, the understanding to take us into the future. The third thing I think that a good roadmap does is it helps people to stay aligned. It helps people to maintain discipline, and it helps them to do that across a number of years. Staying aligned means you've got to have a number of things. First of all, you've got to have an inspiring vision, and a vision that's timeless, that's not a detailed description of what's going to be done, but it's much more about how things are going to feel when you get there. You think about the Netflix or video example that I gave. It's not about saying we're going to have AI machine learning powered stuff, because right now that, day one, that feels too far off. But it is about saying we're going to make sure that every time the customer opens our service, they can quickly and easily find something that they want. That's a vision that can be is constantly refreshed as new capabilities come online, and is constantly of value. You can see what it is you're trying to do to the customer. So you need a vision that people can gather around, and a vision that allows you to grow with it. You need clarity. There's an awful lot of problems that you could solve, an awful lot of things that you could do. How those things come together, which things are important, I think comes from a customer-centered approach, comes from listening to, deeply understanding, and responding to your customers. You need something where you can bring together people from across different areas of the business, so that they can come together and you can start to minimize risk. Think about the RAG ratings that we gave. That's essentially what that's doing. You need to be able to take an agile, iterative approach. You need to be able to adapt to change, and again, that phased approach to roadmaps allows you to say, have we brought in too much into the current phase? Do we have not enough in there? Do we still need to do this, or has the world changed? Realistic timelines to ensure that people focus and don't become panicked, don't become overwhelmed with what they've got to do. And you also need transparency and communication. A good roadmap does that by having a vision that people can buy into, by organizing things in themes that make sense, and by talking about when and why things are changing. So I think to stay aligned, you need to keep on top of those things. A roadmap then is not really a project plan. It's a plan for organizing all of those ideas into ways that people can understand, and ways that will change just fast enough to keep work flowing, but not so fast that you lose all sense of discipline, and you can see that you're getting to where you want to get to. In other words, you avoid distractions, you manage disagreements, and you maintain your confidence. So what have we learned? Well, first of all, think about how big wins can be gained by building little wins into themes. Strategic impact comes from aligning around customer value. And in order to keep your roadmap valuable, you need to review your roadmap regularly. It should be, to my mind, part of at least a quarterly planning process to come up to bring the roadmap out to say, how did we do this quarter? What changes do we need to make? How do we stay on track? And roadmaps are not project plans. If project planning starts to happen in your roadmap, something is going wrong. So keep them separate and avoid the temptation to answer that question. Oh, but so what happens and when will this happen? That's a project planning thing. The important thing is making sure that the theme is straight, and what you do know in a roadmap is not exactly what's going to happen, but you do know that the value you deliver on this theme is going to improve with each quarter that you get through. That's the key thing to focus on. Thank you very much. We've got plenty of time for Q&A, and I'm fascinated to hear your experience with roadmaps, good and bad, and the questions and challenges that you've got. the tips that you may have as well to share around creating great roadmaps.
So we have got a question in Giles, but just before we go to that, could you just let everyone know that you can submit your questions via the Slido Q&A panel? So if you do have a question, please pop it into the Slido panel and Giles will answer as many of those as possible.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I can't see the Slido panel. It's
Okay.
like magic for me. It's just appear out of nowhere.
So the first question that we have today is, what kind of tooling works for roadmaps, and what tools would you recommend?
Nothing that looks like a project plan, I think, is the first thing. And secondly, I think roadmaps are tools for collaboration. So the most effective roadmaps that I've seen have been often been things like that whiteboard that I showed you. They don't have to be super complicated, and most of the roadmaps that I've been involved in creating or in maintaining have been in things like whiteboards, walls, something that's where an entire team, an entire office can see what's going on, and of course these days Miro boards. And I think Miro boards are great tools for managing and maintaining roadmaps. My basic approach to a roadmap is essentially a kind of a Kanban approach, right? Of having a backlog of stuff, and that's what now, next, and future is. It's a backlog of stuff. Very often, I'll have another category of things where ideas that have come in and we haven't yet had a chance to think about where they might fit on the roadmap. But that looks and feels very much like a Kanban board, and so Kanban tools can be useful. For me, the main thing though is making sure you've got a tool that people can collaborate around. You've got a tool that people can see and you can share, and it kind of makes sense. And that's why I showed you the image of the whiteboard earlier. And as I say, for me, the tool I find myself actually using is Miro. I think maybe it's do everything in Miro these days. It's just a kind of post-pandemic reality. Thanks for the question.
Okay, next we've got a sort of a comment and a question.
Oh.
So someone has said sometimes work just has to be done. For instance, there's a regulatory change or you need to re-platform. How do you account for that in a roadmap?
So sometimes that work is kind of carrying on in parallel, and it's almost like kind of the headlines of the future, if you like. We know that in the next in the next 6 months, a regulatory change is going to be announced, and we need to keep an eye on it. Or a regulatory change is going to come in, and we need to keep an eye on it. Or there'll be a shift to a new software platform, or we'll be opening a new office or something like that. Some kind of environmental change that's going to happen, and you can kind of place it on the roadmap. For those sorts of things, often what I'll do is I'll have a kind of a line along the bottom where you can just sort of see, okay, here are some milestone things that are going to be of impact within the now or next or future phase. And then again, when you're talking about how are we evolving this theme, what things should we be pulling across into the coming quarter, you've got that context there, you've got it there as a reminder. Sometimes the things that need to get done are more like a BAU stream, and sometimes could be useful to have a BAU stream or even a theme around changes that we need in order to comply with the AI Act, or something like that. on a roadmap. So sometimes it's useful to organize them as a theme. Sometimes it's useful on the roadmap itself, but it's a different type of value that you're delivering. Sometimes it's simply enough to say we need to be aware that these changes in technology or regulation or organization are going to happen, and they're going to happen at these points, and just keep them there so that as you're discussing what's going on in the roadmap, you can keep aligned to them. So it depends on whether it's work that you're going to need to react to, if you like, or lead. That's a clear enough answer.
Great, thanks, Giles. I know we've got a question from Michelle. She says, great presentation, thanks. I totally agree with aligning on themes and value for customer and business. Our challenge has been a lot of necessary maintenance and technical debt and very limited resources in the team. Do you have any experience or suggestions here?
Oh, I think the other thing that you're trying to do there is be realistic about what needs to change. And I think what you're talking about there is as much kind of capacity planning, isn't it? To say, look at the technical debt we're building up. We actually need to make a replatforming change. So I think it's a parallel challenge really around talking about capacity about the where is work coming from, and the fact that the BAU backlog is growing, and that's choking the team's overall capacity to work on the strategic roadmap. So again, it's roadmaps are governance tools, right? They're not the project plan that a delivery team is working to. They're what happens when the delivery team kind of steps out of delivery mode and takes a longer view, and when stakeholders who are supposed to be coming in saying, these are the business priorities, these are the resources that you've got, this is the strategic vision, this is what we need to do to keep us safe, all that governance stuff can, and the two halves of the organization can have a conversation about what's possible. So hopefully a roadmap is plus your BAU backlog is a way of talking about this sort of growing problem of BAU and technical debt choking off capacity and sucking out resources. I think that's essentially the problem that you're talking about, and the solution is to be honest and clear about the problem. Michelle, I'm curious to know what your kind of instincts and answers are. I don't know if that's something you can get into Slido, but yeah, the conversations are often difficult, right? Because stakeholders, the organization doesn't want to hear it, but they're also about reality, and those difficult conversations are the places where somebody is saying no, are the places where interesting, useful, valuable stuff is happening. So I think the other half of it maybe also is learning how to have those sorts of conversations in a way which doesn't feel which feels comfortable and non-confrontational. And there's a lovely book called Crucial Conversations, which talks about how to have conversations like that in a way which where you're less likely to get painted as being disruptive or inconvenient, and are more likely to get listened to. And I always heartily recommend that book to anybody who's got to have a difficult conversation. I think it's good reading in this situation too. The book's called Crucial Conversations, and it was recommended to me at a conference years ago. Sat on my bedside table. Looks like the most awful, boring book in the world. Didn't sound like fun. I finally picked it up after about 8 months of it just sort of sitting there gathering dust. And I was like, why didn't I read this book years ago? It's brilliant. So that would be my other my other recommendation is get a copy of that and read that.
And I think that leads us nicely into the next question, Giles. What if the stakeholders just won't agree on a way forward?
Yeah, if the stakeholders, so sometimes that happens, and I think we all want things to be perfect, and we want there to be a happy ending, and sometimes stakeholders won't agree, and your roadmap won't look like the perfect canonical example that I've shown up here. And sometimes, if you really cannot get to agreement, you just have to accept that's the world you're living in, and that what you're doing is, you're at this stage in the journey to an organization that understands how to manage roadmaps brilliantly, and it's going to take time because everyone needs to go on that journey, which is a very Zen answer. But Dave Gray, who's maybe one of the most Zen people I know, had a story once he told me about running Dave Gray does visualizations, uses drawing to help people visualize ideas, understand strategy, think about how they about how they make sense of the world. And he was running a drawing workshop for a big bank in America, and so he's working with the board on how do you use visuals and sketching to come up with ideas. And he said, at the end of the workshop, there were a couple of people, and all they had drawn were like 2 lines at the end of a day-long workshop. They just drawn 2 lines, and he was like, I could have looked at that and gone like, oh, what a waste of time. He said, but the thing is, that's more than they'd drawn probably in the previous whole of their careers, and it's about recognizing that sometimes people just at a different stage of the journey, and that progress looks different depending on where you're at. So yeah, sometimes you can't get people to agree, and the thing to remember is that there'll be another quarterly planning session next time round, and okay, this time we had to go back to the old way of horse trading. I'll give you one idea, you give me another idea, and we weren't organizing everything through a beautiful customer lens, and we didn't get to do all of the the good kind of Kanban style grooming that we'd want to do on a roadmap, and it all looked a bit old-fashioned. But next time round, there's an opportunity to say, so some of the things that we did that we agreed last time weren't very helpful and didn't work out the way we thought, but we could still try it this way this time round. And sometimes that's what it takes. So that's my best answer there. I think is that if you've read the book Crucial Conversations, if you've organized things and shown your thinking to stakeholders, and they're still not ready to agree, it's just accept that by exposing people to those ideas, you're making progress, and that change will come eventually, and you're making things a little better.
Okay, and Giles, who do you think the most important people or roles are to be involved in creating and maintaining a roadmap?
As I say, I think it's a collaboration and communication tool. Absolutely, somebody needs to be in charge of it, and that's a product manager's job. It's the person who is responsible for creating customer value long term and being able to track that customer value long term. And in an ideal world, there is a product manager in the organization who has that responsibility. A lot of organizations are in transition, and either don't have that role defined, or have that role defined but have actually not given it all of the responsibility that they want. So I would, in that situation, be looking for, okay, who is the person, the most senior person who can organize ideas at that level, who has some kind of customer / delivery responsibility, which is a little more tricky. But you are going to need to have an owner. You're going to need for that owner to have sufficient influence to be able to say, okay, this is what we should be on the hook for. This is what I should be on the hook for. And then in terms of building it, I think you probably heard in that story the process that I think I'd be going through. I'd be thinking about, okay, you need people who've learned about what it is that the product needs to do. So you've got sort of user researchers, people who've got access to that customer feedback, who are able to say, okay, we need to solve this problem. Here is a user story that we can add to the backlog. You need people who've got who can organize that into customer value, and that's that product manager type role. And you need an audience of people who are able to say, okay, from my point of view, as somebody who understands how the organization works, this is feasible. From my point of view, who understands how our technology works, this is feasible. From my point of view, who understands what our customers need, this is feasible. And to be able to do your kind of RAG rating. And then of course you need to have your stakeholders coming in and sort of parsing all of that, not parsing, sorry, reviewing the outputs of that and saying, yes, this looks like what the business needs, or no, the organization is actually trying to do something quite slightly different and you've misunderstood here, and being able to say, yes, this roadmap looks like it aligns to our organization's mission and strategy and goals and ethos and so on. So you've got those sort of, like I say, a roadmap is this place where your senior management, which is concerned with that level of guidance of the organization, and your delivery management, which is concerned with what are we doing next, how are we doing it, can come together, and that's the place. And so those are the sort of roles who'll be involved, and the sort of ways in which I'd expect them to be involved. Hope that answers the question.
That's great, thanks, Giles. And someone's asking, would you recommend reviewing and updating the RAG status of a theme as part of the regular roadmap review?
Oh yeah.
For example, our understanding of feasibility of the end goal may change over time.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and so yeah, absolutely. I think all of those things, that's exactly what you should be doing. You should be looking and saying, does this seem still hold water? Is it still what people want? Is something else happening here? Absolutely. I think, like I say, if a roadmap is going unreviewed, unlooked at for more than about 3 months, it does start to crumble and become stinky, and you learn so much in delivery, in change, in creating a service, in running a service, that and markets change as well, people change, situations change. So yes, I think all of those things absolutely need to be reviewed, and you may find that other items become higher priority and other themes become higher priority. I think that's a great point. Thank you.
Great, and we've probably just got time for one more question, Giles, and this is probably, I think this is a great one to end on. What's your number one tip for getting buy-in for the roadmap?
Try and get people along to user research. I think it's the most powerful tool that I've ever seen for creating consensus, because it's very easy day to day to be focused on all of the things that you need to do to run an organization, to be part of an organization, to operate within it. And the moment that you see somebody trying to interact with the service or the product that you've built, you realize what it's all for. And I can think of a number of times when I've walked into an observation room, and you've seen like, oh, there's the director of marketing, and he's looking daggers at the chief technology officer, and the head of customer doesn't seem to be talking to anybody, and you can just feel the kind of the tension in the room, and everyone's got their own agenda, and everyone's sort of gearing up to kind of push that, and then they start watching customers, and the conversation shifts to how do we help this person, and it reminds them what they're there for. So that is a great tool for helping people to remember at least that they're all there to try and help the customer. And then the other things I think I'd say around getting buy-in, you need to listen to people and make sure that they know that you've listened to them and heard what their concerns are, before you start putting solutions on the table. If people don't think that you've listened to them, if people don't think that you understand what it is that they're trying to do, it's very difficult for them to get behind what you're trying to do. But if they understand that you know that, and that you acknowledge that, okay, here's how I can help you, or here's how I'm part of that, it's much easier for them to get buy into your ideas. So I'd say those two things would be two secret weapons, if you like, in building consensus. One, show them what the real problem is, show them what it's like for customers, give them that experience, not let them see for themselves, understand for themselves, and come to the realization that it's important for themselves, and make sure that they feel listened to. And I think if you do those things, you're probably most of the way towards creating a good environment for discussion and consensus and buy-in. What a great question. You're right, that was a really good question to end on. Thank you.
Well, I'm conscious of time, so I think we do have another couple of questions, but unfortunately we don't really have time for them. But we will be sharing a recording with attendees afterwards.
Thank you, everyone. That's they were great questions, and it's like refreshing a product roadmap. It's all of these questions come up again and again, and it's fascinating to hear different takes on them, and to know also that they're part of the process of creating and running a roadmap. So thank you. Before we go, we should just mention our next webinar, which is coming up on the 22nd of August. If you hold your phone up to the screen and open the camera app, you should be able to get a registration URL off of this incredibly detailed QR code. I mean, there must be a lot of information in there, but my colleagues will be running a short presentation and discussion group on what is the cost of not doing discovery. Why do we do discovery, and why can't we just get stuck in to work? So the cost of not doing discovery is coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and it's a good one to reflect on during the long days of August. Thank you.